Welcome to the Startup Grind. So my name is Derek Anderson. Welcome to the Startup Grind. We're so excited to have you all here today, and to have Ann here. Just to give you a little bit of background, Startup Grind was started in my 900 square foot office in, hey, Kirill, how are you? Come sit up here, dude. It was started in my office in Mountain View with about 9 friends, and it grew month over month to about 20 and 30 and then like 4. And Facebook cut off our viral loop, so we lost all our users. That's a joke. Okay. Now I know what kind of crowd we have, so I won't do any Facebook app jokes. So we've been hosting events here in Palo Alto in this location for about a year. We've now got events all over the country and all over the world, really, from Singapore to Toronto to Austin to New York to LA. If you're visiting and this seems like a good thing at the end of it, and it's something that you'd want to try and start in your city, please come and talk to me. We are actively growing, and we would love to do it in your city if we're not already, or you can help out in the one that we already have. I want to call out a couple of people before we get started. My good friend Kirill from Scoutsy. Has anyone heard of Scoutsy? A couple of people. You want a seat? Here's one over here. You can come walk right in the front, man. You can be the main event here. Kirill has this really cool company. Has anybody ever tried to find a mobile designer and had a hard time for their mobile web app? One person? Okay, there's some in the back. My gosh, this is like a problem I have dealt with dozens of times. But Kirill's basically gone across the web, found all these amazing designers from all these companies you've heard of. Like, he's got the person that's done Starbucks mobile app in there and their icons, and he's got the people that have done Pinterest stuff. And so if you need a great mobile designer, you've got to go to scoutsy.com. And this is like one of those ideas when I got it in 2 seconds, and I was like, hey, let's do this. Get me on board. And he's like, no, man, you're not. It's not an us thing. So I was like, okay. So that's okay. That means he's smart. So he didn't let me join the founding team. Thanks a lot. But please check out scoutsy.com if you need any mobile designers or any logo work or app icons or anything like that. You'll just find some amazing things. So thanks so much for helping us make this event possible. We've got Tom Klein here from Greenberg and Traurig. Got it. So Tom is a partner at GT, and at Startup Grind we really look for, as we're going global, we look for partners that are global, and their firm is one of the largest law firms in the world, and they have offices literally all across the world. So I know we've got some French guys here. We've got some. Anybody else from somewhere farther than France? Yeah, go ahead, scream it out. Oh, that's not much farther than France. Okay. Iran, excuse me. Wonderful. Jordan. Okay. Anybody else? Hey, kia ora, mate. Kia ora, bro. Okay, to pay here. I lost you. Okay, that's a little Maori there for you. Okay, that's okay. Anybody else? India. Okay. Well, they have offices in all those places. Exactly in those places they have offices. I don't know that for sure, but I'm pretty sure. So, Tom, pretty close?
Pretty close.
Okay.
We don't have an office in Iran.
Okay, well, yet. You're growing. It's growing. So come talk to Tom. They do everything from huge transactions and huge companies, but they also start at the very earliest level. So come talk to him and Dan, who's coming. He's not here yet, I guess. We've also got Brilliant Echo, who has so graciously sponsored our interpreters today for our deaf entrepreneurs, and we're so thrilled to have them. This is the first time we've done this, and we've done dozens of events, so we're hoping this goes well. Seems like it's going pretty well. So it's going wonderful. Okay, Jacob says it is. So we really, really appreciate their help and their participation here today. We're really, really grateful to have you guys. Yeah, you want to give a round of applause? Okay. Only for them, not the other guys, though. That's kind of weird. Okay, so let me introduce Ann Miura-Ko. It's my great pleasure for us to have her here tonight. And actually, before I introduce her, since we've got such a new crowd, you don't know what we're going to do when we introduce her. So this is what we like to do when we introduce somebody at Startup Grind. We like to kind of treat them like a little bit of a rock star. Okay, so just imagine that Christian Bale or somebody just walked in here tonight, and if they were coming up to the stage, we would stand up, we would cheer for them, we would hoot and holler a little bit. So we're just going to do a role play. We're going to try this out one time. Everybody, like I'm introducing her, she's not coming out, but let's try this out. Ready? Here we go. Let's try this out one time. Here we go. Give it to me, give it to me, give it to me. Wow. You always think it's going to go well, Peter, and it just never does. I keep trying. Okay. So Ann Miura-Ko is a co-founding partner at FLOODGATE who has made investments in companies like Dig, Twitter, and Chegg. She is focused on e-commerce, security, and big data. She sits on 8 boards, including Zimride, and she is a graduate of Yale University. She has her PhD from Stanford, where she also teaches. Forbes named her the most powerful woman in startups. That's pretty good, huh? So let's give a big Startup Grind welcome for Ann Miura-Ko. Here we go.
I love it.
That's the first roof we've had raised coming out of the side. I like that. That's a good start.
I'm good with positive reinforcement, so the more hooting and hollering, the better.
Well, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
We like to start off a lot of our events with just getting to know you a little bit. If you could tell us a little bit about where you grew up, tell us about your parents,
Sure.
and
I feel like I should
what they did.
sing something.
Do you want?
We just had karaoke night at FLOODGATE. You didn't want to be there. Let's see. I grew up in Palo Alto, so I went to high school at Pali High, right across the street from Town and Country, back before it was so fancy. My dad's a rocket scientist, so he works at NASA. He's going to retire this year after 30 years there. And I used to babysit for a serial entrepreneur. And so I remember, when I was in 7th or 8th grade, this guy that I was babysitting for, I realized he was on his 9th startup. And it was just sort of the thing to do back in the day. And so I went off to college, and I came from a family of mechanical engineers. And so my big rebellion was I became an electrical engineer. And I had this moment in college where I realized I was actually pretty interested in business as well. And it was an interesting experience because I was giving a tour to this guy of the engineering facility because one of my professors told me to do that. And so I'm telling him this, my lab. And he sort of asks me, what am I doing for spring break? And I just said, well, I think I'm going to go home and visit my parents. And I was feeling really uncool about saying that. And the guy, he says, well, I'm the CEO of HP. And you want to come and hang out with me for a week? And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds cool. And so I did that for a week. And it was one of these life-transforming events where Bill Gates also showed up and was making this .NET announcement. And after I got back, I told some of my professors this was a life-changing thing. And I get this set of pictures from the CEO, Lou Platt. And one's a picture of me sitting in this chair kind of chatting with Lou Platt. And next picture is Bill Gates sitting exactly where I was talking to Lou Platt. And I was like showing my mom, look, Bill Gates can be like me someday. But it was this first moment where I was like, wow, maybe there's something else out there for me. I had always thought, well, I'm going to be a research scientist. That's sort of the path, the family path, the noble family path. And so they said, well, there's 2 options. This is at Yale. And they said, there's 2 options, investment banking, management consulting. So I said, oh, okay. So I went to investment banking for one summer, didn't really like it. And so I ended up at McKinsey for 3 years after college. And I actually really loved it. I learned a lot. They let me do a lot of crazy things that most young people wouldn't get to do. And then I went to, after that, I decided, a lot of people had always been telling me, like, venture capital, this is something you should look into. And so I looked into venture capital. I met this partner from Charles River Ventures by the name of Ted Dintersmith. And our interview was such that we just sat around talking about books and music that we really liked. And I'm kind of a geek, so I really like classical music, and I like modern American literature. So I was reading all this stuff, and I was telling him about it, and he happened to like the same kind of books, and he listened to opera, and so it was a meeting of the minds, and we ended up, he sort of offered me a job on the spot. And I remember I didn't even ask about, compensation or benefits. I was like, yeah, I'd love to move out to Boston and work for you. And so I did that. My second day of work was 9/11. Wow. And so then we spent 2 years. He only made one investment, one that I found. But we spent a lot of time analyzing the venture industry. And I'd always wanted to go back to graduate school. And so I went, I told him I was going to go to law school, and I did the whole application process, got in, and then my husband was going through law school at the time, and I realized that really was not what I wanted to do. No offense to, I don't remember who the lawyer is here, but really didn't want to do it. And so escaped, and then applied for a PhD program, which was clearly the better option. And so ended up at Stanford for a while, and started a PhD program in math modeling of computer security, and was teaching entrepreneurship as part of a way to pay for my PhD program. And it was all in the engineering school.
This is with Steve Blank, is that right?
Yeah, one of the classes that I ended up in was with Steve Blank.
How did you get connected with him initially?
So he was one of 3 professors teaching a class that I was starting to teach as a TA. And it was a really fabulous experience, and we got to meet all these luminaries. I think Diane Green from VMware was a mentor in the class, one of like 8 mentors. And my the partner that I work with today, Mike Maples, also happened to be a mentor and in the class. And so you'd have all these real industry luminaries as mentors to these teams. And so if you didn't like really corral them, they would sort of either not come in and like help the students, or the students would start bickering, and then they wouldn't realize that, and the students wouldn't do well. So my job as TA was to corral these people. And so Mike wasn't paying attention to his team. And so my first interaction with him was me yelling at him for not corralling his team. And
how was that received?
It was actually received really well. He was like, "Oh yeah, you're very straightforward." And so, but that started this really great dialogue that in the future, when 2 years fast forward, I was starting to think of starting my own company. So one of the reasons why I thought it'd be a good idea to go back and get my PhD, I wanted to be more technical again, and potentially start up a company. And so I went and talked to Mike, and my old mentor Ted had said, why don't you find one of these angels? Maybe they'll let you look at their deal flow, and you'll be able to assess whether or not your ideas are any good. And so Mike was really generous. And I was saying, I don't know if I want to start my own company, if I want to join a company, what role would it be? And so he said, just come on in and take a look at some of these companies I'm seeing. So I'd go in every Wednesday and stay for the whole day. And I'd give him sort of my honest opinion about what I thought about the companies he was seeing. And there was this moment where I realized a lot of what I'd seen from 2001 to 2003 around this idea that large funds, they would have trouble unless they were, one of the top 10 firms. They would really have trouble generating great returns for their investors. And so I had talked to Ted about, what is a really optimal size for venture capital firm? Where would it actually be, not easy, but it would be easier to provide awesome returns? And we had talked about, is it a $100 million firm? Somewhere around there felt like it would be much better for the current exit climate. And so Mike was talking about how 500,000 was the new 5 million. And I'd seen my students also in that time period.
This is what year? I'm sorry.
This was back in from 2005 to 2007.
Okay.
I had noticed within my own students in 2003, blade servers were still a big deal. It's cheap, commoditized hardware, and you could stick it in your closet and start a business, but you'd still have to pay for certain things, and it was still a few $1,000s to get things started. By 2007, 2008, cloud services were up and running. You could literally start something with your credit card with not much credit, right? And so there was a game change, sort of a real amazing movement here. We really, between Mike and I, and within Floodgate, we call this the democratization of entrepreneurship. And we really think that this is a really big deal, right? We compare it to the Gutenberg press or when the Ford Model T came out, and what kind of revolution that created, not only within that technical field, but within society as a whole. And so I think, this movement of how inexpensive it is to become an entrepreneur and develop a product is something that's potentially huge. And so when Mike offered me a partnership opportunity to co-found Floodgate, he specifically said you should drop out of the PhD program, but I didn't because I'm Asian, in case you didn't notice. And so I ended up sort of finishing it off on the side, but I also just sort of devoted myself to this opportunity because it was in 2008, it was one of those periods where there weren't that many super angels. There weren't that many angels at all. Remember, this is 2008 when the financial collapse was happening, right? So my timing going into VC is really great. And so I'm coming in and my parents are asking me what in the world I'm doing. My advisors are like, what is this company you've decided to join? And, but to me, it was like this thing that I could see and Mike could see and a few other people could see, but no one else could see this opportunity. And so it was like this carrot that just kept dangling in front of me, and I couldn't help myself. I just had to go after it.
It's awesome. And you talk to us. So you spent those years analyzing venture capital firms. You spent this time analyzing what makes a good firm and about them. What were some of those things that you found? What makes for a great venture capital fund, not just the size of the fund, but what are the other key characteristics that you saw?
Yeah, one of the things that we've realized within Floodgate is when we asked our LPs about data around venture capital firms, and in particular GPs, so the general partners, so the individual investors, one of the things we asked was, what does it mean to be world-class? So my dad has always told me, no matter what you do, you should always be world-class. And so one of the first questions we've asked is, what does it mean to be world-class as a general partner? Well, it turns out that if you want to return 3x of the invested capital that you're investing, if you can return 3x on a regular basis, you are top 3% of all investors, which I think is, it's kind of a scary number that only so few investors can return 3x. And so at the end of the day, I think that's the number we think about. Can we as individual general partners return that kind of money back to our limited partners? Because ultimately that's what we're in it for. Roger McNamee has a different way of looking at it. He looks at it from a waves perspective. He says in every given wave, you have to be in one of the top 3 companies, and you have to have one additional investment in the top 10. And I think that takes you beyond 3x. You'll be an epic investor if you can do that over and over and over again. But if you look at your investments through that lens, it becomes really tough to justify all of your investments. And so it's a good way of thinking about it and retrospectively looking at all of your investments.
What are some of the metrics that you see a lot of funds talk about or go after? Are there vanity metrics for VCs, just like there are for startups, or
for themselves and how they evaluate themselves, or with their startups?
Yep.
For themselves, I don't know, number of retweets.
That's so important.
Like I think there is this. I mean, I think it's funny because we're in a stage where, you could be a celebrity entrepreneur, you could be a celebrity investor, right? And I'm a ham. I love the camera. Hi, but at the end of the day, that's not the way you get into the best investments. It's not the way that you return money to your investors. There are really, 15 companies in any given year that started that achieve, we say, two real metrics. One is $100 million in profitable revenues within 5 years. Or if you think about it another way, $500 million valuation. And that's at exit, right? That's not when someone gives you a piece of paper and says you're worth X $100 million. It's at exit. What is your value? And what do you return to your investors? There are really only 15 companies in any given year that really actually achieve that. And so, one of the questions is how many of those companies are in your portfolio at any given time?
And as you see some of those entrepreneurs, and you guys have invested in some of those, what do you see that's different about those guys that end up, running the companies that are in the top 15 or, in the top 3? What makes them different from the hundreds of other entrepreneurs that you see come through the door?
Yeah, I mean, I've only been doing this since 2008, so it's still question mark which one of my investments will get there. But if I were to take a look at our entire portfolio since 2005 and see which ones have been successful and which ones haven't been, I think the things that we're starting to identify is that, number one, you have to be going after a huge total available market. Right? The surface area that you're attacking has to be really big, and this is not from even a tops-down approach. A lot of people will say, well, mobile advertising is going to be $1 trillion, and therefore, if I even have a toe in mobile advertising, I'm worth $100 billion. I'm talking about sort of a bottoms-up assessment of the land grab that you're taking part in. If you look at how much you're going to charge your customers and how many people are out there that would buy it, how big is that opportunity? I like to see something that's really big. The second thing is actually, something that I think is underappreciated, and that's an authenticity about the entrepreneur. And this is the factor that I think gets us past entrepreneurs who are entrepreneurs because they want to be entrepreneur hero worshipped. And I think that becomes harder in Silicon Valley because there is this notion that being an entrepreneur is this romantic ideal. And what I think, the movies, the TV shows don't recognize is that it's like what they call it. It's a startup grind, right?
Thank you.
It's I think, there's nothing romantic in working 100-hour weeks and not seeing your family and throwing out code that you've been working on for 2 years because your co-founder decided that you're going to pivot, right? There's nothing romantic in that. And yet we romanticize it. And so the authenticity of that idea to that entrepreneur is really important because it gets you through those moments.
Yeah. What other qualities do you see? I know so you've got authenticity. There's one that we talked about the other day that is very, extremely, extremely driven. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, what you see?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of this notion that, when our best entrepreneurs, when you present them with these obstacles, it's almost like they don't see it, right? So my brother works in F1 car racing, chassis design. And one thing he was telling me is on the racetrack, you'll have these, if you look at the obstacles, you're not going to get through the racetrack. You have to be able to see past them and see through the path. And I think the best entrepreneurs are like that. They don't actually see obstacles. They see a path through those obstacles, and they're continuously adjusting their path, and they aren't even thinking about it. And sometimes that means breaking walls, breaking boundaries. breaking people. It's just sort of, it can be a very ugly scene, and yet it's sort of this notion that they have to get to the end zone. And it's that singular focus and drive that gets them to this end. Now, that could be a very, ugly person in some ways, right? You've read, I'm sure many of you have read the biography of Steve Jobs. It's not a pretty person at the end of the day, but it is that singular drive, that vision that drives that person. We really like to see that.
Can everyone hear okay? Is everyone good? Okay. Can we talk a little bit about...
I can speak louder. I'm pretty loud. I'm a mom.
No, you're good. Can we talk about flipping companies?
Yeah.
As a founder, and as a founder with the perspective of, I'm sure you see this every day. Founders that come in and they say, hey, you say, what's the exit on this? Hey, well, we'll do this. We're going to build this product, and so is going to buy us. You guys have kind of a unique take on entrepreneurs that try to flip companies. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, so nothing against them, but I do feel like entrepreneurs should be very aware of what their investors want, right? And I think you should always be really totally aligned with your investors, because the lack of alignment is what creates a lot of heartache between investor and entrepreneur. And so when we say at Floodgate, we invest in thunder lizards, right? We invest in those 15 companies that want to, crawl across the Pacific Ocean, take over Tokyo, and eat buildings and trains and generally disrupt markets, right? We are looking literally for Godzilla. That isn't the type of company that, believe, you're not going to say Godzilla, we're investing in Godzilla, and that Godzilla is not going to sell for $5 million to Facebook that same week, right? And it's just a self-awareness. And I've talked to, at Stanford, to some of my students, if I say to my class, how many of you, if I said, I'll write you a check for $5 million that you could direct deposit into your bank account, how many of you would take that and sail off to the Bahamas for a few weeks? Or, how many of you would take that money and believe that you could turn that into $1 billion?
Is this an offer that you're making for? She's got a big checkbook in the back.
There you go.
Like these.
But 99% of the class, if they were really honest with themselves, they would say, I'm going to take that $5 million and go to the Bahamas, right? And that's not a value judgment on that person, but it is a risk profile that they need to be very well aware of. And, I was just giving advice to a friend of mine about just general career things. And he was saying, should I found a company, or what should I do? And one of the things that I was pointing out was, if you don't have an idea that's screaming out to you that needs to be birthed at this very particular moment, you got to remember that the 100th employee at Facebook did better than 99.999% of all entrepreneurs, right? So if it's sort of a financial motivation, then there's like great companies that you can join that are a rocket ship and you should just get on. But, if there's an idea that's screaming to get out, that's an indication that maybe you are a founder. But it's that there's a threshold for that, I think.
Mike Arrington's talked about that before, where there's a class of people that do that. They'll be at Google pre-IPO, then they'll move to Facebook, and then they'll move on to whatever else is next, and they seem to live pretty great lives. But they're not founders, like you said. So you all make investments that range from, correct me if I'm wrong, 150,000 to roughly $1 million?
Yeah, I mean, we have some greenhouse, but our core bets are from 500,000 up to, more recently, we've done slightly bigger bets around $3 million.
Okay.
But our core bet's 500,000 to about $1 or $2 million.
And what would you consider as is flipping your company? Does it threshold at 5 million? Does it threshold at 10? Because you all have talked about this as well, that hey, if a company has a $50 million exit, you all are getting in at a point where that could still be an incredibly great outcome for you all.
I think flipping is actually more of a psychology, right? So flipping is not you've run out of alternatives and now you've gone through all of your hypotheses as to how to make this a successful business model, and everything has worked up against you. And we've all run out of ideas. And now we're going to go and try to sell the assets of the company, make some money for the investors and for the entrepreneur. That's a different mental model than, I haven't even started yet, and someone gave me $5 million to join their company. That's just like an expensive career fair, right? It's a very different model. And so if you're in it and you've exhausted all of your resources, you've been working hard at this, and you have no idea how to turn this into a company anymore, and now you're going to go out and figure out how to sell the assets of the company and hope that some part of this lives on, it's very different than saying, this is not the right, exit. I think there's also some entrepreneurs who say, we don't want to take this company public. And so, we have to figure out at this point, do we really go for that billion, $2 billion, $10 billion IPO? Or are we going to try to find a great acquirer? We've gone to $100 million in revenues. Now where do we go? That again, I think that's not flipping. They didn't just sort of say, $5 million first offer, I'm gone. So I think it's more of a mental shift.
Why are first-time founders sometimes better to invest in than someone, say, on their second or third company?
Because they're not jaded. I think that's the thing that I love about our job is that we get to work with people who are totally unvarnished, sees the whole world through rose-colored glasses, and everything's about to go their way. And that's just a way of staying forever young, right? People always ask me, how do I stay so young and beautiful? And I say,
that was my next.
I know. It's
how do you stay so young?
It's a lot of expensive skincare products, but also staying close to really young talent. And it's not young in terms of age, it's young at heart. And I see this in entrepreneurs who just have a dream and you get sucked into it. So I think that's what I see. And this actually is not just really for first-time entrepreneurs. You can actually have a second or third-time entrepreneur be that way. And I think that's what's sort of the joy of being an early stage.
So I've spoken with some people that know you quite well.
Uh-oh.
And I said, what about Anne should we know that people probably don't know? And the thing that I heard several times was that you are extremely competitive.
Oh, no.
You are an extreme.
I am. But I thought everyone knew that. Yeah.
No, people don't know that. I read all the blogs, all the Quora posts. No one mentioned that. Yeah. So tell us, where does that competitive fire come from, and what, how does that serve you in what you're doing with the companies that you're seeing? And
I think I think it's innate. I remember when I was 3 years old playing some board game, probably Candyland. It's like a deterministic game, and I'm screaming because I'm losing. And I see it like I wasn't as aware of it until I saw it in my daughter, and it's like a mirror being held up to you. I used to do speech and debate in high school, and as a funny joke, we had coaches who came from Stanford. They were all undergrads, so they were like 20 years old. They would say, "Hey, Anne, if you can make your opponent cry in cross-examination, we'll buy you a slice of pizza." And that was incentive to me. So it was horrible. And I still feel that way. If there's points associated with anything, I remember when Tap Tap Revenge came out, I would get these scores, and then I would mail them to my partner and be like, "Hey, Mike, beat this score." And then I didn't realize it was a text message you can edit, so he'd edit his score and text message me back. I'm like, what? And I'd spend all night trying to get a better score. But I think that's, it's good for me because I like to keep tabs on myself. I'm most competitive against myself, right? So I set goals for myself, and I try to beat them, and I know inherently that I am competitive from that perspective. And so I try to harness it in a pseudo positive way without, we had karaoke night the other night, and my associate never told me he was in a singing group. He just confessed to me before this event. So he'll be
Almost
singing
canceled. You almost
He'll be
just left.
singing later on, trust me.
What talk to you? You have a talking about work-life balance. You have quite an interesting, as you're talking about, a way of working and goals and things like that. You walk us through your kind of typical day. I know it starts at about 4:30 or 5.
So I wake up around 5 o'clock in the morning. This is because I have 3 kids, and
under the age of 5, right?
So 5, 3, and 10 months. And so
would you like to be the CEO of Yahoo?
Yeah, I'm like, Marissa, why is everyone making such a big deal about Marissa? She has 1 child. She's pregnant. It's not a big deal yet. Have 3, have 4, then I'll be impressed. Right?
Wait, let's clap. I think so.
Or twins or triplets. Then we're competing. But no, so I wake up really early, and I think one of the things that we talked about was, I look back on my time and I try to figure out how much time I'm spending on things. And Mike and I have talked a lot about what's a sustainable sort of work week. And a lot of our coaches and mentors have told us somewhere around 60 to 70 hours a week is the magic number. It's sustainable, but it's really hard, right? I don't think 100-hour weeks are sustainable, but I think having done 60 to 70 fairly consistently, that's probably a pretty good core number. And so, I actually, these days I'm logging exactly what I do with my time. So I'm trying to hit, under 2 hours a day on email, which is actually really hard to do. And, how many awesome people do I meet in a week is also a metric that I'm measuring. I also, am trying to keep certain parts of the day clear so that when my kids are with me, that I actually am present for that moment. So 6:30 to 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm off the grid. 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., I try to be off the grid. And then weekends, I work when they nap. And other things that are non-negotiables, doctor's appointments, and parent-teacher conferences. And then, I try to throw in like 1 hour every month volunteering in my kids' classrooms. But you add those up, and it's actually hard to say, like, where do I fit in those 60 to 70 hours? And that's why, you end up backtracking it, and you have to wake up kind of early. But I think that's where, people talk a lot about work-life balance. I think it's really hard to even think about balance from that perspective, because balance implies, you get home and everything's quiet and in order and dinner's cooked and kids are really well behaved. Mine aren't. And my house is usually a crazy mess and someone's screaming. Before I got here, like, my 10-month-old had a fever and I was like handing him off to my husband, like, good luck. And so it's never balance, right? It's never a moment where you actually feel good about everything. So there's all these articles about, can women have it all? I don't think men can have it all either, right? It's like there's a partner on the other side who has exactly the same challenges. And so, I just work to try to keep it together, and hopefully, no one gets hurt in the process. We have really low baseline.
What do you see with founders who deal with the same issues? Venture capitalists, typically you seem to work very, very hard. Maybe it's a much harder, or you work much harder than the average venture capitalist that I know. And what do you see with the founders? Do they work equally as hard? The best founders that you have in your portfolio companies, is there a correlation with work ethic and success in the company?
This is an interesting question that we've been thinking a little bit about, even within our portfolio. We see a wide range. One of our companies, they work 100-hour weeks. I mean, it's kind of insane. And I was asking the founder, like, how do you even do that, right? And it's sort of, new employee came, they forgot something, they came back to the office at 11 p.m. The whole team was there. So they were like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to be here too. I think that, you can't really blame any particular institution, but I do think that Pivotal Labs, with their notion of coming in at 8:30 and working, having the hour lunch, leaving, putting your pencils down at 5:30. They've been in a lot of startups, and that work methodology has had a big influence on engineering culture. And the only thing I would say is I can't say, like, how many hours should a startup engineer work? I don't know. Like, I know most everyone works really hard. The only thing I would say is I've never done better. Like, even going back to my competitive speech and debate days, I never did better because I was smarter. It was just because I worked a whole heck of a lot harder than everyone else, right?
And you had that crying thing that was like a huge advantage, right?
That was, yeah. Plus, I had a mean streak. But I think it was just sort of, people win because they work harder. That's 90% of it, right? And so I think, a startup, if you're in a competitive environment and your competitors' engineers are working 5%, 10% more, there's an advantage there. Even if they're working less efficiently, if they fix their processes and they continue to have that work ethic, there's an advantage there. And so I would just push on that. I mean, I don't actually drop in on my startups at 7:00 to see who's around. But I do think that that's something that, you want to think about as a culture. Microsoft definitely thought of that as part of their culture. They said working hard is one of their cultural cornerstones. And, you should have a discussion with your team as to whether or not that is your cornerstone. And it doesn't have to be, but then what is? We think that's really important in our companies.
Yeah, I was been thinking about that the last few days, and these times in my startup career of, hey, we worked 6 days a week, or we worked whatever it was, 70 hours or or 80 hours, and then the times where we didn't. And I had somebody one of the guys that's working with us, we were talking about scheduling a meeting, and he said well, I'll probably leave at about 5, and you're usually gone by then anyways. And I thought, what? I leave at 5? And it was this, and I feel like I work pretty hard, but it was this kind of mental thing that I felt like, basically was pulling our whole company down, because I might go home and have dinner with my kids, and then I'm on from whatever 8 to whenever. Mm-hmm. But I think that kind of that being aware of those cultural things and saying, hey, we're gonna work harder than our competitors. We're gonna, it's not just, hey, they went to Stanford, we can't beat them, but we can outwork them, we can outsmart them, and if we put in the time, that's as good as a chance as we're gonna have to actually come through with that. So
yeah, I think founders actually have a huge role to play in that. I think it's also communication, right? Because a lot of times with engineers, they go home and then they're like coding at home in their dungeon and nobody knows, right? And so the marketing folks, they're like, well, the coders are going home at 5. I'm out. Peace out, And then they go home and maybe they do some work, but it's sort of, what does that mean? How do you talk about what is work ethic to you? What do you showcase? What do you not showcase? Does it even matter? Is it about end product? If so, how much are you pushing yourselves? How do you verbalize what's too much? Because I think there is such thing as too much. I think it's more about communication and making sure that everyone's on the same page more than a timesheet. That's definitely not the point here. There's no timesheet involved. It is about how do you harness that energy and that passion that you have and make sure that you're going 110%.
I'm going to ask just one or two more questions, then we'll take questions from the audience. So maybe if you'd like to ask a question, just start getting lined up down here in the middle, and we'll, unless you're right at the front, I'll bring the mic down there. You're one of the youngest general partners in the Valley, and
I don't know. I may look young.
Oh, you're young. Talk to us a little bit about what do you see, as you think about your career over the next 10, or 20 years or 30 years. What do you think about, what are your goals? What are you trying to, set yourself up for? What are your thoughts of the future of where this industry is headed?
Yeah, I think for us it comes back to, 20 years from now, I want to look back and I want to look out my window and see all the stuff that I was a part of, right? And that's sort of my competitive streak, is that I want to see how the things that I invested in changed people's lives. And that's the thing that gives me goosebumps when I think about it. And the founders that we've backed, we get to see that journey that they go through, whether it's Leah at TaskRabbit or Eric Koger and Susan Koger over at ModCloth, the guys over at Zimride. I've worked with, Ayasti and Wanilo or Refinery 29. All of these people, they're just sort of going through this point from, some of them are Stanford one guy was a Stanford grad student. I chased him down to his classroom and I had a check in my hand and literally was like, please take this check from me. And going from that to seeing the product and having, the military buy a contract. That's where you start to say, hey, the things that I believed in, now people are starting to see, and people are starting to believe as much as I do. It's cool to have done it before other people did, and hopefully that turns into that 3x return on our full portfolio. But more than anything, I definitely don't want to do it anyway. I think that integrity is so important, and it's the one part of ourselves that, you sell it off, you'll never get it back. And we, as a culture within our firm, we really believe in being an entrepreneur's advocate and going to bat for our entrepreneurs and staying on their side throughout the entire process. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that every person in our team, from our administrative person to our CFO to our associate, everyone is on the same team when it comes to that. And if they're not, they're out of here, right? And we take that really seriously. And at the end, 20-year career, 30-year career, I want to look back and be proud of every single moment along the way, while being able to say, we helped make really great stuff happen, because we aren't the ones making it. I fully admit that. But also, we were there for the ride, and we were there for the low moments as well as the high moments. And if I can say that, I think, I'll be pretty proud of myself.
The venture capital industry, as I've talked to people about it, and as these things at Kleiner Perkins and other places have happened, the feedback I continue to get is, that the venture capital industry is kind of like being in a boys' locker room most of the time, and it's just, you're talking about ethics and morals, and I wonder, how prevalent do you see that? Is that unique to Floodgate? Is it unique to a small group of partnerships, or do you find that the majority of venture capitalists have those same kind of goals?
Well, I think we're lucky. We get to work with the people that we want to work with, and I think we've been really privileged. The people we get to work with, in this industry have been really awesome people. And particularly in the Super Angel crowd, whether it's, Josh Koppelman, Rob Hayes, Michael Deering, Steve Anderson, I mean, those are righteous people. And I think, one of the advantages that we have at Floodgate is that we started off gender balanced. There was this question on Quora. They were like, what's the highest percentage of females in a VC firm? And I was like, oh, that's us. We're 50%. And that led to something very unexpected. I don't think Mike wasn't looking for a woman, right? He was just kind of like, we met, we hit it off. It was awesome. But because we were gender balanced, our first initial thought of when we're going to do a company offsite, it's not to hit Vegas and go to the strip clubs. It's sort of, let's do a cooking thing and go paint pottery or sing karaoke. So it's just like it's ingrained in our culture, right? And I remember Mike at one point, before we had Tommy on board as our associate, he said, I walked into the bathroom and there's the women's bathroom was taken because Sydney, our CFO or admin person, was in there. And so I went into the men's bathroom. I was like, oh, the toilet seat is up. And I went back out and I said, Mike, this is not a place for barbarians. And he was like, how did I end up in a industry that's male dominated, surrounded by women? And it was, we laugh about it, but at the same time, I think we lucked into it. So it's never been really a thought for us. We've never actually carefully constructed a culture that's that way. It just sort of happened. In terms of the integrity component, I think a lot of that has to do with Mike. And if any of you know him, he is just an amazing guy. And, I will, go to bat for him 1 billion times because he took a chance on me when no one else probably would have. But also, when I did my due diligence on this guy, because we are going to be a 2-person firm, there wasn't a single person who would say anything bad about him. And I was like, clearly I'm not digging deep enough. But I've yet to meet anyone who says anything bad about this guy. And so I'm just extraordinarily proud to work with him. And because I get to work with someone like that, I feel like it makes myself better. We attract amazing people. And that's, not only the people who choose to work with us, but then, the entrepreneurs who will take our money from us, and we've just been really lucky along those lines. The people who surround us, it's just extraordinary.
Can we give Anne a big round of applause? Don't move, please.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take a couple of quick questions. Can I get you guys just to step back probably about 10 feet, and then we'll be able to maybe get you on camera. Are you going to start, Peter?
Yeah, well, it's more a comment. I was going to ask a question about if there was any kind of an intimidation factor in a male-dominated world, but after hearing you speak, I withdraw the question.
I make people cry.
Make Pete cry.
Hi, I'm Yasi. I have 2 quick questions. One is, when you saw the democratization of entrepreneurship through cloud computing and other technologies, what made you decide to become a VC versus entrepreneur? And the second question is, if in reality, female founders have a harder time raising money, and if so, what is your tips for female founders?
Yeah. So, with all things, it was sort of the reason why I ended up at Floodgate wasn't I had this moment where I said, you know what, I'm going to be a VC. I'm going to go look for that job. In fact, I said when Mike first brought up the idea to me, I said, whoa, big fella, I am going to be a technical co-founder of a company. You're asking the wrong gal. And I'm like, and I have to finish my PhD. So I didn't have any intention of going down that path. But there was this moment where you're seeing all these entrepreneurs walk through the door to meet with Mike. and they're asking for somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. And you're asking them what other alternatives they have. And they literally have nowhere else to go. They have first round capital, they have Steve Anderson, and they have Mike Maples, right? And it's just sort of, it's not like today where you have 500 different opportunities, you have angel lists, you have all these different places to go. It was literally what I believe every other entrepreneur must feel, that moment where you're like, wow, no one else sees this. It's either I'm like being visionary or I'm having visions, and I don't really know which one, right? And it was, and I think, you know, that's that moment where you're just like, you can't stop yourself from doing it, even though every logical person around you is like, well, you know, maybe you should go talk to the big firms and be an associate there and then follow the partner track position, or maybe you should go, you know, work in an investment bank. And they're giving you all these like very logical career advice, and none of it makes sense to you. That's how I felt. So it was really just an opportunity. As far as women go, women founders, you know, we actually have a bunch of women founders within our portfolio. And we haven't actually made a concerted effort to go find female entrepreneurs. They come to us, and you know, we pit them against the same exact standards as male entrepreneurs. And so we think that, you know, they pass exactly the same rigorous test. And so we're particularly proud of the female entrepreneurs that we've backed. So I can't say, you know, from my perspective, is it more difficult? There are things that I think women need to be coached on in leading companies and being leaders and participating in business. But I don't think that necessarily should hold women back. And I think that, you know, at the end of the day, we have more and more female entrepreneurs. Bill Campbell mentors like a bunch of female CEOs. There are people who are really interested in seeing this ecosystem thrive. And, you know, I just think that we just need more participation. And so that's the thing I would think about, is just, you know, be a part of that community, learn from other people, seek mentorship, and there are people who are willing to give it.
Hi, my name is Josh. I'm really interested in big data, and I think big data is one of the most fascinating things that we deal with on a daily basis. You work with big data in venture capitalism, trying to sort of figure out the trends from the large available pool of data. My question to you is that I think the most insightful information that people gather from big data are the questions that we're not asking yet that we should be. Mm-hmm. How do you find the questions that you're not asking yet that you should be asking?
It's a great question. I mean, it was that was fundamentally behind one of the investments that I made. It's a company called Ayasti. One of the observations I had at some point was, gosh, data is so big that it's not about finding a needle in the haystack. That it presupposes you know what the needle looks like, and you actually can figure out what the haystack also looks like. Big data is such that it's not really the size of the file. It can be just extraordinarily complex data sets, right? 300 patients, you see their entire genomic sequence. How do you find 2 patients that are correlated in that? That's very difficult. And so, you know, Ayasti has this technology where they're looking at providing a mathematical technology that creates a visualization of how data is correlated when it's extraordinarily highly dimensional. And so those are the types of investments I think are really interesting today. I do believe that, you know, the infrastructure behind big data, a lot of those questions around, is it Hadoop and MapReduce? You know, what kind of database should you be using? Is it NoSQL? Is it Cassandra? We haven't made investments in those spaces. I'm looking a lot at what happens at the analytics layer. How do you figure out what to make of that data? Because I believe fundamentally as data becomes more complex and and there's just huge quantities of it, you're going to have to figure out what to do with that data. So that's an area that I'm really interested in.
Thanks for sharing your insight. So I just have a question about, when is it a good time to start seeking angel funding? So we actually have a product. We've been around for a month, and we're 3 PhDs, so we wanted to get a good validation for ourselves before, we go out and, shout out from the rooftop, right? So we have we have like a reasonable user base at this point, and, we have market validation. Do you think this might be a good time where we go off and seek funding, or do angels like super angels basically look for a few tens of thousands of users and like maybe an active revenue stream already in before they even look at investing?
So I actually would flip that question, right? The question is, when do you want to raise money? And the power is actually much more in the entrepreneur's hands than it is in the investor's hands, because you determine ultimately, at what point do you actually accept capital into your company? And because do you bootstrap it? Do you want to raise $100,000 to get to a few more users? Do you want to raise $500,000? Do you want to raise $5 million? And how much you raise and what valuation you raise it at largely starts to determine what kind of exit you're also, closing off. I encourage you to go as far as you can without taking any money. If you can get to the home run and to the promised land without any capital, right? That's much better. Yeah, and so the more you can squeeze out of your company without taking money from people like me, the more of your own company you're able to own. And so I would say, you need to ask yourself, at what point do you want to go out and give investors the opportunity? And at that point, if you're going to take $100,000, that's a very different proposition in terms of what you might have to have proven out, because that's your friends and your family. To $500,000, you're probably looking at more professional angels. $1 million, you're looking at smaller seed investors.
Great.
Hi, Ann. My name's Rob. I run a meetup called Idea to IPO, and I run into a lot of entrepreneurs in the Valley. And you mentioned that confidence and optimism are good qualities, but I sometimes run into entrepreneurs that are delusional or on crack. How do you distinguish between the two? And have you ever funded someone that was sort of leaning towards the delusional side?
Well, that's sort of the difference.
Or crackheads.
We say visionary versus having visions, right? I do think that it's a really fine line. But at the same time, some of the best entrepreneurs that we've funded end up being really hard negotiators. And so, sometimes in that negotiation process, you're like, who is this person, right? And so sometimes, I think that's a good thing. At other times, it's distracting. So what I'm looking for is the person, the woman or the man who is kind of delusional in the right ways, right? So they can't be talked out of what they really believe. And so there's this difference between everyone's talking about the lean startup and sort of taking data and really observing it and using that data to determine what strategy you should have. I actually think it's more you should have your strategy and allow your data to help you inform, whether or not you continue to believe your hypotheses or if you're getting talked out of it. And so I think, the thing that's important, the part that might be a little bit delusional is the entrepreneur who chooses to ignore some of that data and knows when to ignore it and knows when to listen to it. And if you're completely rational, you're going to listen to the data every single time as if it were whispered words of the future to you. And I think the best entrepreneurs take it, interpret it, and do what they want with it.
My name's Andy. I just had a question for you about in the deals that you're seeing now. You mentioned that you look for waves of kind of areas and try and invest in the top companies. Can you give us some sense of the waves that you're seeing now from companies that that are coming to you for capital? And then second question would be, since you mentioned lean startup and customer-driven development, how do you push that idea within the companies that you fund, or is it a requirement, and where have you seen it succeed really well, and where have you seen it not so successful?
Yeah, so I'll take the second question first. It's interesting. When Eric was first starting to think about lean startups, and Steve Blank, I was teaching with him. I still teach with him. They came to our office, and they were talking about the OODA loop and this fighter pilot guy, and they were talking about manufacturing. It was just sort of they're coming up with this name, lean startup, and this was back in 2008. And so today it's just interesting to see this notion become so prevalent in our culture and startups, but in large corporations as well. And I think that's been a really great thing. We still are huge proponents of hypothesis testing, and it's something that I teach at Stanford. It's this notion of business model development that I think is really critical for a lot of startups at this stage. And the way I use it is a lot of entrepreneurs, when they first come to us, they're very product focused. And I think that's great, but immediately you need to move beyond that. You need to move to really who are your users, who are your customers. You need to think about how do you do demand creation. You need to think about what channels you're using. You need to think about your price. You need to then revisit what is the product, how big is this opportunity. And so just the frameworks that we've developed alongside what Eric teaches and what Steve teaches has been really helpful for us in how do we coach our startups in that initial stage. What parts are they paying attention to? What parts are they not? The parts that we don't talk about as much alongside lean startup is the whole company development component, right? And to us, that has a lot to do with what's the culture that you want to define within your company? How do you do compensation within your company? How do you do reviews? How do you hire and fire people? All of that is about how you build a great company. And that's totally separate from product and business model. And unfortunately, a lot of times very much ignored right now. And people talk about culture like it's motherhood and apple pie. They'll say, oh, we want, a environment that's about meritocracy and individualism. And then you find out that they're giving team-based bonuses, right? And so it's really about what is your core values, but in that moment when you declare a value, what is it that you're giving up? And so as a firm, we're really thinking about what does it take to build the next generation of amazing companies, and how do you do it at the ground level? And that goes far beyond product and engineering cycles, and it moves into what do you do as a leader, and how do we build great leaders in the future?
Okay, this is our last question.
Cool. I actually have two questions. Originally,
This is our last two questions.
early on, you said that you had the opportunity to work like every Wednesday in some company, or not even work, but just go in and hang out for a bit.
Yeah.
If I ask you really nicely, could I score something like that in your firm?
I think the problem is that
Adam's only getting one question.
we're not so organized anymore. So it used to be Mike actually had all of the startups come on Wednesday, and now like Tommy will vouch for the fact that like it's hard to corral us.
Talk to Tommy over here. Okay, second question.
Okay, so my second question is, I run an online social site. We got about 250,000 people. I shouldn't say we, it's just me. I kind of built it out of a passion for a certain industry that I do. And I'm doing a million other things. And I really have no idea how to monetize this thing or even what to do next, because I'm totally burnt out because it's just by myself. I'm also starting like a TV show in Puerto Rico. I just opened a tattoo shop down there, and I'm doing all these other app crap. But I need help, and I don't know who the hell to ask. So I'm going to ask you. What should
You're burned out? Really?
Yeah, crazy, right?
Man.
I think this is the one founder problem. I think you need to find a co-founder. I think so often being a founder is very lonely, right? I think that's what you're discovering. And part of it is we like to fund at least 2 founders, usually mostly because it gives you just someone to bounce ideas off of. You don't get stuck. And then also when you feel like quitting, you can't because you're going to let this other person down. That's the part we don't really mention all the time. But I think that's sort of what it sounds like you need to find someone who can be the yin to your yang, I guess.
It's finding a smart person. I feel like everyone I deal with is a retard.
Smart people in this room.
That's why I'm here, to try to meet some people.
Okay.
Talk around.
He's never been to Startup Grind before, right? This is your first time?
Really.
First time ever.
Yeah, okay.
You'll find lots of smart people
That's
here.
problem solved.
Yeah, so,
Thank you. Okay, let's give Ann a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Help me out there. Thanks. I just have 1 or 2 announcements, and then we'll let you guys go. First of all, we're going to be back in this room in 2 weeks with Dave McClure, and it's going to be crazy, but it'll be fun. So please come to that. And then we've got the CTO of Yammer in September, and some other big names. So please come and hear those guys talk. Again, if you're from out of town and you're interested in getting a Startup Grind going with us, please come see me or see Russ. Where's Russ? Russ over there on the right side. And let me just recognize a couple people on my team. Francisco. Where you at? Francisco, please go meet him. McKay Danes, are you in here? Oh, he must have left. Oh, that'll cost him. Oh, there you are. Erica in the back, my wonderful wife. And who else am I missing? Todd, live blogging at startupgrind.com. If you've got a great startup that he should write about, go talk to him. We blog there. I want to just call out a couple more people again. My best friends at Scoutsy. If you need a mobile designer, if you need someone awesome to do your app icon or any of that work, go to Scoutsy right now and find them. They've got their Twitter hashtag over there if you can't figure out how to spell that. Please come meet Tom from Greenberg Chawrig. Gosh, I'm so good at that. Great law firm all over the world. They're based. Tom's office is here, just down on University. So please come meet him and his team. Is the rest of your team here? Or are you guys? You want to just stand up and let them know who you are, right here, in the back. Kirill, stand up real quick. Let everyone see you. This is my Scoutsy buddy. Great. And I just want to introduce a couple of people. We like to say this: if you come to Startup Grind and you don't meet someone, then you have failed tonight. So I know you felt this was a great chat. Ann is amazing, and we all learned so much. But you cannot walk out of here without meeting someone. So let's just warm things up here real quickly. Look at the programmer or founder next to you and give them a big high five. Let's just do this right now. Go. That's supposed to be everyone, not just the not cool kids. All the cool kids say, we're not doing. Oh, and everybody's leaving. Look at that. They're all like, oh, we're out. We've had enough. We're done here. Okay. Let me just hold on. 1 second. Let me introduce a couple of people. Give me 1 minute. 60 seconds. That's all I ask. Okay. Don Francis, stand up. Tell everybody who you are, Don.
I'm Don Francis, ex-Google. I do community development. And if you're looking for a non-retarded co-founder, I might be able to help you.
I'm sorry for my horrible friends. Okay, Peter, tell us who you are.
Peter Mullen. I'm an independent business development and sales consultant, helping a lot of startups. So if you have any questions,
Really cool guy. Come meet Peter.
B2B.
So is Don. But Mark, tell everyone what your company is that you founded.
Mark from MediaFire.com or Cloud Storage.
Who's used MediaFire? Yep. Company. Will, you want to tell people who you are, what you do?
Hi, I'm Will from Wave Group. I do sound. If you're involved in sound in any way in your startup, talk to me.
Anybody else want to quickly introduce themselves? 5 seconds. Now's your chance. Make yourself heard. Yeah, in the back. Oh, yeah.
I'm with White Truffle. We're the e-economy for talent. We have over 12,000 engineers registered on our site looking for startups.
I've written about you before. Do you remember me? Yeah, go ahead.
So hi, Val. 3 weeks out of the
Okay, well, you're the right place. Okay, yeah, go ahead. That's a nice. The audience likes it. Okay.
I'm Chen. I'm the other co-founder for Scalzi. So if Carell's cornered, you can come talk to me. If you need
Oh, you're the one. He was, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Hey, my name is Karthik. I'm from Jarpal. We actually help you personalize your local experience. So if you want to know more, just talk to me after that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm Mike. I'm from Delorem Design, and so if you want one level above Scalzi freelancer design.
Oh, no, shut that down. We're shutting that. That is a bad call. Shut it down. That's a lifetime ban with one more of those. Okay, go ahead. We know them. Whoa, I don't know those kind, but I know the. Okay, that's a good way to do it. Good idea. Okay, green machine. Okay, great. Go ahead, yeah, with the good question.
Hi, I'm Yossi. I'm the co-founder of Active Pepper, which is a location-based mobile application that helps you find sports partners and sports activities. So if you're in sports, check out our website and leave your email. We're launching our app in 3 weeks.
Good.
Hi, my name is Bernie Maloney. I currently work for the Forces at Good. Who do you know who's a great app developer who's got Jedi-like skills and can deliver results without wielding a lightsaber?
Yoda?
Mobile's on fire. So are we. Send your best and join the Forces at Good.
Okay, come here. Can you come here for a minute? Yes, you. Yeah. No, you. Okay. Yeah, Jacob, come up here and tell everyone what you do real quick.
Hello. I work with a group of these deaf individuals. We have we're contract workers interested in developing our own mobile apps, and so that's pretty much what we do, and that's what we're here for.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. Okay, one more here, and then actually, let's end on that note. Thank you for coming. We'll see you in 2 weeks, and come again, please. Thanks.